Thanks for clicking. Make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this one.
The SS Grand Meridian was a floating palace. 15 decks of indulgent buffets, infinity pools, spas, casinos, and themed lounges that could rival Vegas. It catered to the elite. Rich retirees, influencers, honeymooners, and billionaires with too much free time roamed the decks. Below them, hidden behind crew-only doors, ran the machine that kept the floating city alive. And that machine? It ran on the willpower of people like Jude Morales. Jude was the chief of guest experience. Fancy title, not so fancy hours. He'd worked cruise ships for over a decade, starting out bussing tables and now coordinating everything from kids' club puppet shows to emergency protocols. He was beloved by his team and respected by nearly everyone on board. Except for the new captain. Captain Reginald A. Langston III. A man with a name too long for his ID badge and an ego that needed its own deck. He came from the Navy and treated his civilian crew like they were cadets. Chain of command this, proper protocol that. Jude had tried diplomacy, professionalism, even humor, but the man was a brick wall in dress whites. "You're too soft," Langston had said during their first meeting, not even 5 minutes in. "If you give these passengers an inch, they'll drink your blood with a side of caviar." And so it began, a reign of micromanagement and tone-deaf leadership that slowly turned paradise into purgatory. Langston's edicts came daily via ship-wide memos and included gems like, no guest shall wear flip-flops in public areas after 5 p.m. All crew must salute the captain on site, even housekeeping. Buffets must close promptly at 9 p.m., even if a child is mid-scooping mashed potatoes. He slashed overtime pay, removed free laundry privileges, demanded that happy birthday songs be sung in a naval marching rhythm. Jude tried to shield his team. He pleaded. He reasoned. Langston's response? Follow orders, or I'll find someone who will. It all came to a head on the second leg of a 12-day cruise through the Caribbean. The ship was docked in St. Kitts. Jude's team was scrambling to prep for Captain's Gala night, the flagship formal event of the cruise. Langston had made it extra mandatory this time. Every guest was to attend. No exceptions. He wanted military-level punctuality and an ambience of class and supremacy. Jude rolled his eyes. The crew was already stretched thin. There were complaints about plumbing on Deck 6, a vomiting incident in the smoothie bar, and the showgirls were short one dancer. But Langston didn't care. He stormed into Jude's office, pristine uniform as stiff as his mood. "You will follow the schedule to the second. That is an order." Jude blinked. "Sir, if we don't finish prepping the ballroom, guests will be waiting in a half-decorated." "You are not being paid to improvise. You are being paid to obey. Get it done. By the book." Jude stared at him for a long beat, then nodded. "Yes, Captain. Exactly by the book." Langston grunted in approval and marched out. That night, Malicious Compliance set sail. The captain's gala night was always the crown jewel of any cruise. Glimmering chandeliers, tuxedos, violins, lobster tail, endless champagne. Jude had organized more of these than he could count, but none under such absurd constraints. Captain Langston's new by-the-book protocol had turned what was usually a collaborative effort into a minefield of exact checklists, dress codes, and execution orders. So Jude complied. Perfectly. At exactly 7 p.m., the doors to the ballroom opened. Not a second early, not a second late. Unfortunately, only half the tables had centerpieces. What? Because the official prep schedule only allocated 22 minutes for floral assembly. Not 23. Not enough time, per Langston's breakdown. Jude had asked for 30. Denied. The string quartet? On break. Langston's document had scheduled them for arrival, 6:45 p.m., but didn't mention setup or warm-up time. They showed up as ordered. Still tuning. Appetizers? Still being plated. The chef had asked to adjust the galley schedule due to a shipment delay in St. Kitts. Langston had refused. Stick to the itinerary. So guests, hundreds of them, wandered into a lukewarm ballroom with half-done tables, no music and no food. But the kicker? Every crew member on duty followed Langston's appearance policy to the letter. Which meant the assistant cruise director wore a full velvet ball gown to clean up a spilled shrimp cocktail. Which meant the head of security, who'd been stationed at the entrance for crowd control, stood sweating in a white tux jacket that restricted his movement. Which meant Jude, who'd normally float around in slacks and a cruise blazer, arrived in a full ceremonial tailcoat with gold epaulets that hadn't fit right since 2017. Jude smiled politely as chaos slowly unfolded. Guests were confused, annoyed, One elderly couple loudly asked, "Is this some sort of performance art?" Captain Langston arrived precisely at 7:12 p.m. and walked in like royalty. He paused, surveyed the room, frowned. "What the hell is this?" he growled under his breath. Jude approached with professional calm. "Sir, everything is exactly to spec. Down to the minute. You call this acceptable?" "I call it obedient." Langston's eye twitched. Before he could respond, the lights dimmed unexpectedly. The MC, who had not received her updated cue sheet due to Langston revoking pre-gala briefings, assumed the show had started. She welcomed everyone over the mic, said something about Art Deco minimalism as the night's theme, which it most certainly wasn't, and introduced the captain before the food was even out. Langston, red in the face, walked up to scattered applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we celebrate order and precision, values I personally hold dear." Halfway through his speech, a massive clang echoed from the galley, followed by the unmistakable squawk of a chef yelling in Italian. Then came the wave of complaints. The lobster was undercooked. The wine was warm. The vegan option was just steamed carrots on couscous. Someone had a shellfish allergy but was served scallops. One guest loudly claimed he saw a rat. He did not. It was a napkin blown by a vent. And through it all, Jude remained serene. Because all of it, every single mess, was the direct result of following Langston's orders without question. Crew morale that had been hanging by a thread began to shift. Whispers turned into snickers. Servers began to joke among themselves. One bartender crafted a drink called the Langston, warm gin with a dash of bitters and an olive, no ice. By the end of the night, half the passengers left early. The violinists played a confused medley of classical and soft jazz. A kid threw up in the captain's path after eating 5 shrimp in a row. Langston returned to his quarters fuming. Jude simply filed a nightly report that concluded with, "Gala executed exactly per captain's instructions. Results attached." The next day brought something unexpected. Jude was summoned not to the captain, but to the corporate rep on board, Marianne Toller, head of fleet operations. She rarely came out of her suite unless things were really bad. "You really followed every directive to the letter?" she asked, folding her hands neatly over a folder. "Yes, ma'am." "Even the wine temperature instructions?" "Checked with engineering." "The fridge was set per Langston's manual override." She nodded. "And guest feedback?" Jude handed her a stack of comment cards. Words like embarrassing, chaotic, and "who let this happen?" jumped out. Marianne flipped through them, then looked up with a small, sly smile. "Keep doing what you're doing, Mr. Morales. Let's see how deep this iceberg goes." For the next 48 hours, SS Grand Meridian entered a strange twilight zone of flawless incompetence. Everything ran exactly as ordered. Nothing ran well. Breakfast trays arrived exactly at 7 a.m., cold and missing condiments. Deck 11's shuffleboard tournament started precisely at 3 p.m., even though a storm had closed the outdoor decks. The spa denied a billionaire's wife her 3:15 facial because her confirmation email hadn't been authorized in the central booking manifest. The crew had become expert-level malicious compliance artists. Jude didn't even need to instruct them anymore, they were inspired. One engineer ran a temperature diagnostic that took down hot water for a full hour, because Captain requested the HVAC be recalibrated using naval protocol standards. The printer ran out of toner, and instead of replacing it, the IT tech cited non-emergency downtime window from Langston's own handbook. Guests complained. Oh, how they complained. Langston for once seemed shaken. He barked orders even more aggressively, changed itineraries midday, and issued new policy memos, none of which helped. The ship had turned into a bureaucratic hellscape of his own making. And then came the crew meeting. Marianne Toller, the corporate rep, called it herself. Mandatory attendance. Every department. Every rank. Even the captain. It took place in the main theater, capacity 1,200, and it was standing room only. Langston sat front and center, arms folded, tight-lipped. Marianne took the stage. "Let me begin," she said, "by thanking you all for your exceptional dedication to following orders this week. Truly. I've never seen compliance this committed." A wave of suppressed chuckles rippled through the room. "I've read every report, every memo, every complaint, and I've come to a decision." She turned toward the captain. "Captain Langston, effective immediately, you are being reassigned to land-based fleet logistics. Your new station is a warehouse in Des Moines, Iowa." The room froze. Langston's mouth parted in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm quite serious," she replied. "You've demonstrated a unique talent for protocol. I'm sure the spreadsheets will appreciate your leadership." Laughter broke through like a dam bursting. Langston stood abruptly. "This is insubordination." Marianne smiled coolly. "No, Captain. This is consequences, brought on by your inability to lead people." He stormed out of the theater, nearly slipping on the glossy stage floor as the entire crew clapped. No cheered. The very next day the ship felt alive again. Guests noticed. Crew smiled more. The bartender introduced a new drink called the Morales. Smooth, balanced, with just enough kick to keep things interesting. Marianne called Jude into her office that afternoon. "You knew what you were doing," she said, sipping espresso. "You let the system cave in on itself." "I just followed orders," Jude replied with a half-smile. She tapped a folder on the desk. "How do you feel about being captain of guest operations across the entire fleet?" Jude blinked. "That's 10 ships. 12 starting next season." He leaned back slowly, trying to hide the grin creeping up. "Only if I don't have to wear epaulets," he said. "Deal." Back on Deck 6 as the ship cruised into the sunset, the crew held an unofficial send-off party. No uniforms, no memos, just good food, laughter, and a live band playing off schedule. Jude stood at the railing later that night, watching the water trail behind them. The horizon ahead looked calm. But if another Langston ever showed up? Well, he now had the full playbook for mutiny by compliance, written in gold letters and signed with a smirk. The end.
And that, my friends, is how a luxury cruise went from captain's orders to captain overboard. Figuratively, of course. What I love about this story is how it shows that the best way to deal with power-hungry micromanagers isn't always to rebel loudly. Sometimes it's to follow exactly what they say and let their own rules bury them. Jude didn't fight back with anger or rebellion. He didn't sabotage the ship. He simply gave the captain exactly what he demanded and let the fallout do the talking. Have you ever had a boss like Captain Langston? Someone so obsessed with control that they sabotage their own success? How did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear about it. If you were on that cruise as a guest, what would you have done during gala night? Would you have complained, roll with it, or maybe even join the crew for the Langston cocktail? Let's hear your take in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And hit that bell for more wild stories of workplace chaos, satisfying revenge, and of course, juicy malicious compliance. Until next time, remember, when the people in charge stop listening, sometimes the best way to win is to follow orders to the letter.